If nobody teaches you how to do it, then how are you going to be successful? Don't budget. It's a waste of time to create a traditional budget for especially a brand new business. If you don't start paying yourself, it's really, really hard to start because mentally you're thinking, I need every dollar I make to keep my business going. When women want to borrow to grow a business, it's called debt. When men do it, it's called leverage. If you don't feel like you can ask your accountant questions about your return, questions about how they filed it or what decisions they've made, then you're in the wrong office and you need to go find somebody else.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential. Finance can be a daunting challenge for many entrepreneurs, especially mothers juggling business and family. But our guest today has made it her mission to empower female entrepreneurs with the tools they need to achieve financial stability and success. Jen Paterson, founder of Dollar Divas, empowers female entrepreneurs through mindset coaching and practical financial strategies, helping them overcome hurdles and master money management. Get ready to be inspired as we dive into her invaluable insights on mastering the psychology of money, growing a sustainable business, and finding the perfect balance between your finances and your dreams. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Jen Paterson.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Tell us about your story, what you do, and why.
Well, my story started when I was in university. I've always loved numbers and money, and I was finding myself in the same situation over and over and over again. Classes filled with dudes. And I would go to financial conferences and it would be a sea of like white males and then little 18-year-old me in like my sweatpants. And, I always felt like a duck out of water, but I was fascinated by the subject. And so I just kept pushing myself to go and do these things and go to these places and surround myself with this information. And I went into business as a financial advisor, and I came across the same story over and over and over again. I would meet somebody who was amazing at their given trade. They were a business owner. They loved what they did. They had so much passion. They had so much success bringing in clients and customers and delivering in an amazing way and just really giving so much of themselves in their business. And their financial side was feast or famine, living hand to mouth, struggling, stressing. Like I saw so many people who had like real obvious stress to the point where I saw there was, some people losing their hair. We all understand financial stress in some way, shape, or form. And to me, there was a major disconnect. Like, why is this person who is phenomenal at what they do really struggling financially? And usually it just came down to the fact that nobody taught them how to do it. It's very, very straightforward. And it's really not that difficult, but it's kind of like driving a car. If nobody teaches you how to do it, then how are you going to be successful? It's not like we hand 16-year-olds keys to cars and say, good luck, figure it out, enjoy. Like we handhold them through the process. And yet when it comes to money, something that we all deal with, even more so than like a driver's license, we're expected to just be good at it instinctually, which is absolutely insane. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing what I was doing. What I do now is, helping people along that path and that journey of, realizing that not only is money not scary, that also they can be good with money, even if they're not math spreadsheet type A personalities. You don't have to be that person to be good with money. You just need someone to show you the ropes and to help you set up the system so that it's easy, because it really isn't that hard. It just takes someone showing you how.
Yeah, I totally agree, because a lot of people that may go into business may not have the fundamentals. And I, for one, made a lot of mistakes when I first started my business and got myself into so much debt because of running ads, not knowing the return on ad spend, not like cost per acquisition. Like it was trusting the wrong people and agencies as well. So mismanagement of money. And then I've had to pivot as well. But I wish I knew the fundamentals. I wish I did the podcast way back earlier and got some more advice as well. But I think because I never studied it, I'm more in a sales and marketing background too. So I love growing customer service and building, but the money part, trusting the wrong people, having the wrong bookkeepers, making mistakes, not using tools, that had a massive impact, which, I hope that this learning it. Like this podcast, this episode can help others as well. But can you talk about mindset and how because there's, like you said, business is very stressful. There's a lots of feasts and famines if you don't know how to run your business properly. I've wanted to give up so many times when I've felt like a failure and running out of money and then waiting for more. So let's talk about mindset and how we can overcome these financial challenges.
Absolutely. So, when it comes to managing your money, because it's so directly linked to our survival, it is imperative that you get your head wrapped around money mindset. It's not something that you can just sort of be like, oh, well, it'll take care of itself. It won't take care of itself. You need to actively work on it, and you need to actively work on it for the rest of your life. It's not something you can tick off a to-do list and say, oh, I'm good, moving on, because that's just not how it is. It's sort of like your physical health. You can't get in shape, run a marathon, and then say, oh, I'm done. I'm good till I die. No, you have to continually work at it. It's the same thing with your financial mindset. So, when you're first starting out, it can be really scary and overwhelming to just look at your finances. Even just opening statements or opening your online banking can be overwhelming and can make you feel physically uncomfortable. And so getting comfortable with that is like step one when you're starting out the sort of financial journey, opening up your statements and getting comfortable with that. And instead of thinking, oh my gosh, like, what's it going to be? Oh, panic, take a minute, feel where in your body you're having that discomfort and sit with it for a minute and think to yourself, okay, what does this actually mean? Does it mean for me to look at my statements right now? Is it saying something about me as a person? Is it saying something about me as a business owner? And just sit with that with a curiosity rather than a blame, rather than oh, I should have, would have, could have. I mean, we've all made mistakes. We're human. I mean, I've made thousands of mistakes that I wish I could go back and change, investments I wish I hadn't made, money I wish I hadn't spent. Like, okay, yeah, we've made the mistakes, but like, where are you feeling that discomfort? And sit with it for a little bit and get curious about it. Like, why is that coming up? And then look at those statements on a regular basis until you no longer feel that physical discomfort when you go to do it. So that's kind of like the start point of the journey. And then if you really want to start diving into it, I always start to look at your childhood. So
the belief systems that we've had and
absolutely,
scarcity
Linda.
mindset.
Absolutely.
Especially, I was brought up poor, very poor. My mum had raised a single mum and she barely had enough money and she was working so hard. I never want to be like that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so driven, and because I don't want to be like her. She used to slave around sewing and looking after 3 kids and we barely had any food. So I'm aware about the scarcity mindset as well, but the belief systems, and that's another thing as well. So can you go a little bit deep into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing you want to do is, like you've done, bring awareness to how you were raised around money. So like, what are your first money memories? How did your parents talk about money, or the people who raised you, how did they talk about money? How did you manage money sort of as a young person? Did you have an allowance? Did you work for your, pocket money? Like, what happened when you had it? Did you run out to the store and buy candy, or did you, hoard it in your little jar? Like, what are some of those things that you remember from being a child? And I find that a lot of those same patterns will show up in your adult life with just bigger numbers attached to them. Really, it's the same patterns over and over again with just more zeros. So what are some of those? And get really curious about it. And one of my favorite activities to do with a lot of my clients is you just write the word money at the top of a page and then just start writing. And I really, encourage people to do it pen to paper rather than like fingers to keyboard, because there's just, I don't know the specific science around it, but I do know that you will find more aha moments. You'll get a little bit deeper into it if you really do take that pen to paper. It is more effective than fingers to keyboard. It's something to do with the way that our brains are wired with the hand to pencil kind of thing. Again, don't know the science behind it. Please don't quote me. I am not a neuroscientist, but I do know that there is some juice there. So take a pen to paper and just start writing and see what comes up. Don't censor yourself. Don't, try and write it as it's going to be beautifully read. Stream of consciousness is fine. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. All we're trying to do is bring up what needs to come out. And, this is something that I even do every year, because as I age and my own perceptions change around money, my beliefs, my values, then my own mindset is shifting and changing. And I sometimes need to take a minute and come back to it and say, okay, like, let's go back to the basics and see if there's anything coming up that maybe I'm not aware of that might be holding me back and self-sabotaging, and see what comes out of those, that brain dump. You'd be amazed at how many aha moments show up just on the paper. And, once you've kind of established that, then it's time to start rewiring your own beliefs and core values and things like that. And the way to start doing that is start looking at your language. So what we say out loud is what gets repeated inside our brain and our subconscious. And if we're constantly using words like broke, poor, I can't afford it, right?
Yeah.
If that's coming out of our mouth on a daily, hourly basis, then we're going to find ways to make that true. Whereas if you start rewiring things and start changing your language, then subconsciously you're going to start finding opportunities and seeing the upside of things. So, one of my favorite ones is I can't afford it. I'm sure we've all said it at some point. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. That's why it's one of my favorites, is because, it was sort of the thing that was said over and over and over again in my own household as a child. And, we can't afford it, we can't afford it, can't afford it. And so, when talking to my own kids or, in my own life, rather than saying I can't afford it, I'll say, well, I'm choosing to spend my resources elsewhere. Because realistically, I could blow off paying my mortgage and go to Mexico. Is it a good idea? No, but I could. It's a choice that I'm making to spend my resources to make sure that the roof stays over my head rather than blowing it off and going to Mexico. And so instead of, I can't afford it, it's I'm choosing to spend my resources elsewhere. And that takes the power away from the money and puts it in your hands. And it seems like a really subtle shift, but it's a really important one because it puts you in the power position and not the money. Another one is I'm really bad with money. And so, with that one, people will say, well, I don't want to say I'm good with money because it's not true. And that is absolutely true. If you try to go from one extreme to the other, the little voice in the back of your head is going to say, I don't think so. No, you're full of it. But you can say, I'm learning about money. I'm working on getting better with money, because that is the truth. That is the absolute truth. And your subconscious will believe that. Whether you are taking step 1 or step 50 along that journey, I'm learning to be better with money will always be true. So those are some of the things that you can kind of start working on if you're really looking to change your financial life for the rest of your life. Because, these are the things that you do them once and you do them consistently, get started doing them and do them consistently, it will literally carry you through the rest of your life.
No, I'm definitely a big believer as well in the subconscious thoughts and the things that we say to ourselves. And I've read a book called The Power of the Subconscious Mind, and also other books as well. Ooh. But these are great books. But you talk, like, I've started making a practice in the morning and at night time to say thank you for the wealth that's coming my way, thank you for the health, like being grateful for it and stuff. But while I might be getting wealth, one thing is to keep it. So how, let's start talking about practical strategies, because wealth coming in is one thing, but maintaining, because sometimes when money comes in for my business, I have money coming in, but I have to buy a lot of stock, for example, for my store. So what are the key financial metrics or KPIs that entrepreneurs should actually track, the very basics for their business? And I do use tools such as Xero now to track all the profit and losses and expenses and stuff. But, what are the key financials that entrepreneurs should actually track?
Honestly, I'm not a huge believer in being really obsessive with tracking. I think that can really get kind of like a rabbit hole. It can take up a ton of time, and you can track thousands of things, and whether or not that's actually going to move the needle forward is the jury's out on that one. It's to be determined. So rather than being obsessive about tracking, I'm more concerned with, how often are you checking out your finances? Are you just leaving it till tax time? And then do you have the angry shoebox of shame that you dig through Not that I speak from experience at all on this one, by the way. So if you're feeling bad about it, don't worry. We've all been there.
Mm.
But, are you looking at it once a year? Are you looking at it once a month? Or are you taking control and looking at it once a week? And that's the thing that's really going to make a difference. So depending on the type of business that you have, what is important to you, and it also depends on who you are as a person, right? Because yes, profits are really important and we always want to make sure that we're profitable. And if you are, working into the negative, then that's a whole other conversation. But what's going to be important for one business is going to be completely irrelevant for another. So it's not necessarily what specific things are you tracking, but how often are you checking in with them? And how often are you looking at the metrics for your particular business? Is it once a quarter, once a month, or what I recommend is once a week? So I always recommend what I call the money power hour. So set aside some time in your calendar, make it once a week, give it an hour, and spend some time with your finances. And that might be doing your bookkeeping and tracking your expenses. That might be opening up your P&Ls and making sure that everything's on track. That might be a conversation with your bookkeeper and making sure that everybody's on the same page as to how that should be going. Maybe that's the time that you prep your taxes or, have a conversation with your accountant. Doesn't matter. I don't say it doesn't matter what you do during that hour, but the specific tasks are less relevant than the fact that you spend an hour with your finances every week.
I like that. Great advice there. When do you think is the best time to bring a bookkeeper into the business as well? Because I started early and I let them take control of it and they made a lot of mistakes. And then I had to learn to start doing it myself. And then, now I want to be able to free up my time and get a bookkeeper in to do some financial analysis as well to see where we can make more or reduce some of the expenses as well. So when is the best time for a business to make sure they get a bookkeeper? Do you think early or when you get a better understanding of the numbers?
I think you need to suffer through doing it yourself for even a little bit because of exactly your story of not understanding how a good bookkeeper works and not understanding the numbers enough to find the right person for your business. Because just like every other industry, there's good, bad, and fantastic bookkeepers. But unless you know the right questions to ask, you're going to have a tough time finding those fantastic bookkeepers, that right person for you. So is it unpleasant? And is it something that most people aren't going to do perfectly? Of course. But muddling through it in those early days, and usually in the early days in most businesses, you don't have huge levels of bookkeeping because you just don't have that source of revenue and expenses. Like in those early days, there's not a ton. I mean, there's always going to be the outliers, but usually brand new businesses don't have a ton of bookkeeping that needs to be done. And most of the people that I've worked with can do it during their power hour and get it done once a week and stay really on top of it. Once you feel like you've got a good sense or your bookkeeping has become robust enough that it's taking longer than that 1 hour a week, that's the time to start looking for somebody else. Because realistically, you'll know enough about the business and your finances for you to ask those right questions and find the right person for your business. But also, they're going to do it faster than you because that's what they do all day, every day. It's their area of expertise, but most likely not yours. So if it's coming to a point where it's preventing you from utilizing your time in the most efficient way, then that's the time to start looking for someone to outsource that to.
Great advice. Do you have any tips on budgeting and cash flow management for entrepreneurs as well? Because that is a bit of like you said, when you mentioned feast and famine, I just thought, yeah, that's stuck into my head because money coming in and then just goes straight out. Coming in, what I mean? Like, do you have any advice or tips for that?
I have an entire course on that. So cash flow management is such a hot topic, especially when you're dealing with entrepreneurs because of that exact thing that you said. Money's coming in, it's going out, and there's no steady paycheck. It's never predictable. It's really, really hard to budget. And so the first thing I say to my, clients and entrepreneurs I'm talking to is don't budget. It's a waste of time to create a traditional budget for especially a brand new business, because one of two things happens. You either make more than you planned and you have no sort of plan for that money, and 9 times out of 10, it'll just slip through the fingers of most entrepreneurs. Or you make less than you planned and you have to figure out where to make cuts. And that's really, really hard. So budgeting is great when you know what you're making, but when you have no clue what's coming in, it creates chaos, stress, and wrinkles and gray hair and things we don't necessarily need. So rather than trying to budget as an entrepreneur, what I recommend is looking at your revenue as a single dollar. So breaking it down to a single dollar of revenue and how you're going to allocate that dollar of revenue. So depending on, again, your business and your life, you might allocate like 99 cents of that dollar just to keeping, your kids fed. That's fine. You might be on the opposite end of the spectrum where you're spending 99 cents of that dollar keeping the lights on in your business. Both are totally fine. And starting with that, starting to decrease the percentage or the cents amount that you're spending on that one thing and allocating it elsewhere. So creating a tax account. So actually having a separate bank account for all of these different jobs that your money has to do. So a separate bank account just for your taxes, a separate bank account just for an emergency fund, a separate bank account just for your operating expenses, and then a separate bank account for your paycheck. So this is a big one because entrepreneurs, we're not good at paying ourselves. We're terrible at it.
Yeah. So when did you start paying yourself? So I've heard people in business, me for example, they don't pay themselves because they put all the other, like you have to pay all the other things first. And yeah, so when is the right time to start paying yourself?
Day one. Day one. Here's why. Is it going to replace a 9-to-5 salary on day one? Probably not. But psychologically, if you don't start paying yourself, it's really, really hard to start. Because mentally you're thinking, I need every dollar I make to keep my business going, and it's my baby, and I want it to grow, and I want it to thrive, and I want it to be successful, and it's really hard to start paying yourself. So if you do it from day one, psychologically it's a lot easier. And rather than, having to go from zero to paycheck, all you have to do is increase the amount that you're paying yourself. So it breaks down again to that single dollar. How many cents of that dollar are you planning to pay yourself with? And maybe in the early days, it is 1 or 2 cents of that dollar. And that's fine.
You've got your staff, you've got, all the operating expenses. So
Exactly.
What percentage do you?
It depends on where you're at in your business, and it depends on what type of business you're running. Like the thing that I like about thinking about it as a single dollar is it's a very flexible model. Somebody who's got a full staff and who has, a brick and mortar business, they're going to be paying themselves a much smaller percentage of their revenue than somebody who's like a coach who is a total solopreneur and just needs a computer and an internet connection, right? Like their percentage of what they pay themselves is going to be much higher just by the nature of their business. So there is no one answer. There is no one size fits all because everyone's wildly different. And the other thing that's going to change is as your business grows and evolves, the percentage is also going to change. Like what I pay myself now is wildly different than what I paid myself 5 years ago because my businesses have changed and grown and evolved. That's why the power hour is so critical, is because you have to be paying attention and keeping on top of these things so that you can be really confident with these decisions that you're making. And it's hard to cover, all the different nuances of paying yourself and all that in a, 20-minute interview. But really, that's what it comes down to, is looking at your business and starting with that 1 to 2% and then just tweaking it based on what works for you. And when you think about business operating expenses, it's kind of like toothpaste. So it's a bit of a weird metaphor, but stick with me. It's kind of like toothpaste. So we all understand, you get a brand new tube of toothpaste and you load up your toothbrush and brush your teeth. Weeks pass, you get to the bottom of that toothpaste, and then it's like, ooh, I forgot to buy toothpaste again this week. But you twist it, you shove your thumb into it. Maybe you go to the kitchen and get a knife and rip it open and scrape out some toothpaste. Your teeth get brushed, is the long and short of the story, is your teeth get brushed no matter what. It's the same thing with our money. If the money's in the account, we'll find a way to spend it. But if there's less money sitting in that operating expense account, you'll get creative. You will figure out a way to make it work. And that's why we do it the way we do it, because psychologically, you will find a way to work on less if you have to. And when you siphon off that money, even if that's at 1%, 2%, siphoning off that money means that you will get paid and your business will still function.
You mentioned separating accounts. How many different accounts should we have that we should all have, like, separate? You got the tax, emergency fund, paying yourself, operating expenses.
I sound like a broken record, Linda, and I'm so sorry, but it depends. It's so funny because I've literally worked with clients who have gone with a very bare bones basic, what I call the architecture. And that's sort of your tax, your operating expenses, and emergency fund. Like, that's a very bare bones. And I've had literally clients with up to 15 different accounts.
Wow. Okay.
All with different jobs to do, because that's just how their brain understood it the best and what felt comfortable for them. Like, they really liked it really compartmentalized. They had accounts for their payroll, they had accounts for certain savings goals, they had accounts for income tax, they had accounts for sales tax. Like, it was very compartmentalized, and they loved it because for them, that's just how they saw the world and saw their finances. So, if you're looking at setting up something like this, I would take a second and think to yourself, what do I wish I had money to pay before it came due? Like, what are some of the things that pop up in my business that throw me for a loop? Maybe it's licensing fees, maybe it's continuing education, maybe it's, for my other business, we do markets every year. And so having those market fees ready and waiting for when I have to do the applications is a game changer. Like, it really depends on what works for you, the person, and what works for you, the business.
Okay. That's good to know too. Can we talk about separating our personal and business finances? Because I know that I hear some people, they mix the two. What are your thoughts on that? Any advice for that?
Don't.
Yeah.
Just don't. All it's going to do is cause you stress, anxiety, difficulty, gray hair, stress, wrinkles, stress again. So just don't. Do yourself a favor. And I know it can be really tempting. Again, this happened to me literally last week, where a client paid me in cash and I threw it in my wallet, and I was out somewhere and I thought, oh, this is cash. It'd be so convenient just to use as cash. And I had to check myself and say, no, this is not me, Jen Paterson's cash. This is Jen Paterson Business's cash. I need to deposit it and follow my own system. I need to follow my own advice here. And I can't mix and mingle it because, I find this happens all the time a lot with side hustlers. They're like, oh, well, this is kind of business money, but I also pay my mortgage out of this account and I buy some groceries. And what ends up happening is it's hard to know if you're profitable because it's all in one account, especially if you're a side hustler and have a 9-to-5 that might be unknowingly supplementing your business. It's really hard at tax time because you get a receipt and you're like, I don't know what this is for. Did I buy, milk for my pancakes, or did I buy milk to make my product? Like, there's no way of knowing. It just makes it so much more difficult. You end up losing money because you're missing write-offs. And, if you ever get audited, oh my gosh, like, that's a whole other ball of wax that's just gonna age you 5 years in 5 seconds. So do future you and current you a favor and just draw a line in the sand. This isn't personal me. This is business me. The two shall not meet in the middle. And it's just going to make your life so much easier. And one of the things I hear back from a lot of my clients, especially the newer business owners, they'll say, well, business bank accounts are really expensive and I don't want to spend all that money. And, it doesn't have to be a business bank account. If you're just starting out, you're a sole proprietor, this is a side hustle, just open up a separate bank account. Go get one of those free online banking, whatever. I mean, there's lots of options out there now. Just have it separate from where you buy your groceries and pay your mortgage. It's just going to make everything easier now and in the long run.
Yeah, totally agree. And it just makes it more organized too. So if someone was just starting out, a mompreneur, an entrepreneur, how do you help people determine the pricing for their products or services? Because sometimes people undervalue their services, or sometimes people, like, I have an accountant friend who she went through the numbers with me and she said, look, the margins people don't realize margins are so important, because when she factored the average margin on my products, she said, it's too low. You're going to keep making losses. You need to increase it as well. So, can you give us any advice about proper pricing models for products or services for people that are just starting out?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny you mentioned that. I would literally posted about that on my Instagram today because every person I've talked to struggles with pricing. It's a universal challenge across the board because I find, particularly with women entrepreneurs, we want to be accessible. We really want to be accessible to everybody. We want to help everybody. We love what we do. We love our clients so much. We want to make sure that we really help everybody. But then we end up pricing too low, burning ourselves out and being useless to everybody rather than helping, the few and helping them properly and being sustainable with your business. So when it comes to pricing, like you said, do the math. Figure out what are your profit margins, and, things to take into account that a lot of people don't think of is unsold merchandise, losses, either from theft or breakage, or, you just forgot about it in a storeroom somewhere. Those things need to be taken into account because you're not going to sell every unit of every product that you ever make. So that has to be factored in. You also want to factor in like your time, because you have value and that you bring to the table. And a lot of people just skip right over that. They look at the dollars and cents that they've spent and they completely ignore their labor that they put into a product or the labor that goes into curating a collection or, whatever. So that's another piece of the puzzle to take into account. And, making sure that things like obviously your taxes and all of that is covered. So do the math, do yourself a favor and do the uncomfortable, unpleasant math. It's not always great, but it is helpful for a lot of my clients and things like that. I do actually have a template that can walk you through that process. I'll make sure that that's all linked up at the end here, but do that uncomfortable math. And then the other thing to take into account is not only the hard stuff, but the soft skills that you bring to the table as well. Your creativity, your expertise, your experience, that goes into your pricing model as well. It's a bit of a cliche now, but we talk about like Tiffany's, and it's not I don't think it's a paperclip anymore, but I went on their website today and they have a notebook for $200. Like, am I going to buy it? No, but somebody probably is. And, that goes to show that you don't have to price yourself at the bottom and just cover your expenses. Your creativity, your experience, who you are, the magic that you bring to the table has value as well. And so make sure that's being woven into your pricing, because it's really easy to overlook that. And that all circles back to that mindset that we talked about at the very beginning of knowing your value and knowing that what you bring to the table has worth.
Yeah, and your self-worth as well. Yeah, that's beautifully spoken as well. Say your business is doing really well and, they're making profits. When is it the right time to scale and reinvest in the business? But how do they do that while maintaining the financial stability as well?
Absolutely. It's that separate account. It's siphoning off, again, starting with that 1% to 2%. I call it growth money, but you can call it reinvestment. You can call it whatever you want. But it's siphoning off that, at the beginning, 1% to 2%. And then as you maybe grow and are gaining more clients, more revenue, more known, I say notoriety, then you can siphon off maybe a higher percentage and then start looking before the money is there. Start figuring out, who is it that I want to hire? What is it that I want to accomplish? Have those discussions, have those meetings, be on those sales calls and say, I am looking for XYZ. I'm not ready to hire yet. I'm looking to hire in April, May, June, whatever. People will have those conversations with you before you're ready to sign on the dotted line. And that way, when you have the cash to pay them, you know exactly who you want to hire, and you don't have to start the process at that moment and then spend the next 3 months finding the right person. You want to take your time, because it's not about just when you invest, but who you invest in. And panic investing will be a waste of money every single time. And again, I definitely speak from experience on that one. I've done the panic investing and it's been a waste of time and money every time.
What do you mean by
So
panic investing, though?
investing in somebody because you feel a panic need for something,
Mm.
because you've either got a problem you want to solve today or yesterday, or you feel like you want to grow so fast and you just need this person, you just need this to do this thing, and you buy out of emotion because
Mm.
they've said something great on their sales page, or they said something that, resonated with you on social media, kind of like the way you buy gum at the checkout. You invest in a coach or a social media manager or a marketing person, whatever, but they're not the right fit because you didn't actually take the time to do your due diligence and figure out, what is it that I want to accomplish? And is this the right person to get me there? So step one is starting to put the money aside, but step two is looking and finding that person before you're actually ready to. And the trigger points really come down to, again, it depends on your business. Some people will say invest before you're ready. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think that can lead to a little bit of difficulty, but I'm also not the person that says, make sure you have 6 months of payments lined up. Like that's a little excessive. So it's sort of a balanced of, when you feel like you're on the cusp of growing and you probably can grow a lot when you're able to hire that person, that's the time to start looking and start saving before you're ready. That's the time to do the thing before you're ready, is start siphoning off that 1 to 2%.
What about when you're wanting to scale and you don't have your own funds and you're looking to get loans or investors to come on board? What are your thoughts on that? And because, for example, for me, I want to expand and grow some more machines because I've got vending machines and I want to expand more. But now that the interest rates are like for me to expand fast, I need to get a loan. And I know the interest rates are pretty high as well. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the payments, and how can we manage that so that we're successfully growing at the right scale, not too fast, but manageable, especially with repayments with high interest rates?
Yes, absolutely. When women want to borrow to grow a business, it's called debt. When men do it, it's called leverage.
Okay.
Right? Women are deterred from borrowing to grow their business. Whereas generally when men do it, they're encouraged. It's seen as a savvy business move rather than being irresponsible. So that's the first step of the thing. This first part of the equation is, looking at it from a perspective of, are you actually going into debt or are you using leverage to grow your business? Second part is paying attention. So using that power hour to be really on top of your payments, because usually when it comes to debt, it's not necessarily the taking on of debt, it's the letting it get out of control and not being on top of making sure that you are putting enough money back into it so that it's not growing. So rather than, just maintaining the debt with interest only payments, you're actually paying down the principal and being really clear with your lender or, your investor or any other person of like, what are the terms of this? How do I pay down principal? Or am I just feeding the interest monster, and making sure you're reading that fine print and understanding the details of that contract. If you're looking to grow your business with debt, it's a great way to do it if you do it with your eyes open. So, taking the time to research who it is you are getting a loan from, and getting really clear on not only the terms of the repayment, but just the terms of the loan, understanding how the interest is charged. Is it simple interest? Is it compound interest? Let's be honest, it's going to be compound. And understanding how compounding works and how is it compounded, and all of those details as well. So I think it's absolutely an option and can be a really good option if used strategically and intentionally. I think what the problem that happens is people jump in without reading the fine print because they see the money and they're like, oh, I'll use it and I'll grow my business really fast. And they don't understand the fine print. And then they end up in hot water because they didn't do their due diligence and make sure that what they're paying back and how they're paying it back is in line with what's actually going to move their business forward.
What other common pitfall mistakes that you see mompreneurs and entrepreneurs make, especially in the finance part?
Not paying attention. That is by far the biggest mistake I see people making over and over and over again. And it's people who are brand new in business. It's people who are established. It's people who have multiple businesses, huge corporations. Not paying attention is the absolute worst thing you can do, because that's when things go sideways. You know, we talked about the shoebox of shame. It's just that on a grander scale. Not knowing what's happening with your finances, not keeping your finger on the pulse of them, is going to run your business into the ground. You know, you can't just ignore it and hope it takes care of itself. On the less detrimental side of things, you're going to lose money. On the other end of the spectrum, you're looking at people committing fraud and, you know, massive fines and penalties and things like that because you just weren't paying attention. And it happens over and over and over again. And it breaks my heart, honestly, because just taking the time to look at those statements, taking the time to figure out how is the finances working in my business, whether you're a solopreneur or a corporation, understanding how that works is so critical for success. So you've got to pay attention and take an hour a week. Like, it's not a lot, and it really is enough to maintain your finances and be really, really informed about them.
Interesting. And let's just talk about tax for a second. Common tax or legal pitfalls that entrepreneurs should be aware of as well. Like you mentioned, putting money aside for a tax account, but do you see other pitfalls that entrepreneurs make regarding tax?
I think the biggest one, I'm not a tax expert. I don't pretend to be, because I work with people all over the world, and tax law is wildly different, no matter where you're, even, you know, within various states and things like that. But I think the biggest mistake I see people making is not keeping track of things in an efficient or habitual way. I think the best example I have of that is I have a girlfriend who I used to meet for breakfast once a week, and we would talk about business and things. She was another solopreneur, and we would just have a breakfast to get out of our house and have a conversation with somebody besides our laptop. And so, you know, at the end of every meal, she would break out a pen and write, "Breakfast with Jen discussed XYZ." And then she filed her little receipt into her wallet, put pen away, and off she'd go. And I remember thinking one day, like, just how efficient that is and how much easier it's going to make it when she goes to do her books later, because she's done the work already. She knows exactly where that receipt, you know, came from, what it's for, why she has it. There's no detective work. She doesn't have to be a sleuth to figure it out or spend, you know, 20, 30 minutes. And the time savings on that is huge. And then when she sends it to her bookkeeper or her accountant, it's exactly clear of where it needs to be. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is hiring the wrong person, which, you know, we've talked a little bit about, but also sticking with somebody out of loyalty because you've been with them for so long, or they were the person your parents used, or you inherited them when you bought a company or whatever. You know, sticking with an accountant or a bookkeeper because you feel like you have to, and there's this weird sense of, you know, this loyalty that it doesn't need to be there. I remember having a conversation with one of the people I was working with, and she looked really like stressed and irritated and aggravated. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, what's happening? She's like, oh, I have to see my accountant this week. I'm like, okay, so why is that causing you so much anxiety? She goes, I hate my accountant. He's a jerk. And I was like, okay, get a new one.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because she literally went, oh, like somebody had just, you know, taught her about the meaning of life. Like, oh, I can do that. And I was like, of course you can. Just because you've always been with an accountant doesn't mean you have to stay with them. And it was just something that she almost needed permission from somebody else to say, you can go out and find somebody different who you like, who you feel good talking to. And if you don't feel like you can ask your accountant questions about your return, questions about how they've filed it or what decisions they've made, then you're in the wrong office and you need to go find somebody else. Because again, you need to be able to understand what's happening in your business. It's your business. That person, you are paying them. They work for you. You don't have to treat them like dirt, But you also need to, be able to be comfortable enough to ask those questions. And if there's something in your return you don't understand, bring it up and say, well, why did you do it like this? Can you explain to me why this decision was made so that you understand what's happening and what decisions are being made on your behalf? Because at the end of the day, it's your butt on the line, not anyone else's. And it's your business. You want to make sure that it's being taken care of in the way that you want it to, and that someone, if they can't explain that, why they've made the decision they have, then they're not very good at their job.
That's good to know. Wow. What are some of the key practices that have helped contribute to your entrepreneurial success and your journey so far? Like, what are the things that have helped you become successful?
Habits. I love habits. Motivation, determination, they're wonderful. They're fabulous, but they are very fickle and they are not going to be there for you. I'm telling you, your habits, they're like that best friend who at 3 a.m. will help you bury a body. Like they're the ones that are there no matter what. So being really intentional and strategic with the way I create habits has been a complete game changer for me. About 5 years ago, I read a book called Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. And I don't use this lightly, but it changed my life. Like it really, really did. Because I've read a lot about habit formation and I've read, The Secret of Habits and Atomic Habits, but they always felt to me like they was too big. It was too challenging to take that much on because I was a young mom, I had a toddler and a baby, and I was just exhausted all the time. And when I read Tiny Habits, he said, if you can't do it in under 8 seconds, it's not going to stick. And I thought, hey, I have 8 seconds. That's all I have. But I do have 8 seconds. And, that really spoke to me as a young mom, as a business owner. And so his methodology of super tiny habits that you build on just completely changed the way that I do business. It changed the way that I see my life and the way that I want to accomplish goals. So being really intentional and strategic with habits that I create around, managing my finances, making sure that my business, all of the tasks that need to get done actually get accomplished, making sure that my time spent in my business is actually time spent in my business and not surfing Facebook. All of those things, come together to create the success that I've got, had up until this point. And, the other piece of the puzzle is making sure that my schedule is time blocked efficiently and coming back to those time blocks on a fairly regular basis and reevaluating whether or not they're still working for me. And sort of looking at my calendar and going, okay, well, am I sticking to my time blocks? If I'm not, okay, why? Is it that my energy levels have shifted during the day because I'm in a different season of my life? Or is it that the kids' schedule has changed and this is no longer serving me and trying to, manage this while they're wanting to ride bikes outside is no longer sustainable? Like, how can I be, again, very intentional with the way that I organize my week and sort of looking at it like a game of Tetris and seeing like, what do I need to get done? What are the things I cannot move, like pickups and drop off from school? And how can I work within the confines of my day and my energy and my mental capacity to fit everything in?
I love it. You seem so very organized and structured.
Very type A.
This has been really insightful and very great advice and practical tips on finance. So guys, if you found it valuable, please do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe button. And if you're listening on the podcast, if you can hit the follow, I'd really appreciate it. Finally, where can people find you, Jen?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Jen Paterson. That's JenPaterson.biz. And you can also check me out at dollardivas.org.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Jen.
Thank you.